In this video, we will show how to do the questions in Module 2 of the math portion of the SAT practice test number 8, published by the College Board. You can find this test by searching College Board and paper practice tests in any internet browser. Or you could go directly to the website you see on the screen. A link to this website will also be in the description of the video. I'll also link a PDF of the practice test that I'm doing in the description of this video. Once you find the College Board website, you scroll down, and the test we're going over in this video is in Bundle 8. So you can download the practice test number 8 there. And if you want the answers, you can go to how to score your practice test. And if you want answer explanations in written form, you can also download them here. Some of those written explanations will be different than the explanations I show in this video. The practice test number 8 will look like this. And the first portion of this practice test is a reading and writing section. There's modules 1 and 2 of that. And then module 1 of the math portion of this practice test starts on page 30. That will be linked. Explanations of module 1 will be in a separate video. We're going to do module 2 of the SAT practice test of the math portion of it in this video. So in module 2, as you can see, that starts on page 40. The first page of this module has a formula and a fact sheet. The second page of the module describes how to format your answers. And then the questions start. So module 2, questions start right here. So let's go ahead and do these questions of module 2 practice test number 8. So here we go. Question 1. What is the y-intercept of the line graphed? Now the y-intercept is where the line, in this case line, but in any case some curve, hits the y-axis. So as we can see, we're hitting the y-axis at the point 0, 5. And so the answer to question number 1 is the point 0, 5. And you can see that this is option C of multiple choice option C. So of the multiple choice options, use option C, 0, 5. That's the y-intercept of the line that's graphed there. Question 2. For a certain region, the table shows the average number of store employees in 2016 by type of store. Based on the table, how much greater was the average number of store employees in warehouse stores than in supermarkets? So we're going to figure out how much greater one was than the other. This is going to cause us to do subtraction. So we're going to have warehouse average minus the supermarket average. I'll just put AVG for average. So we look at this table. Average number of warehouse is 365. Average in the supermarket is 130. When you do the subtraction, you get 235. So there were 235 more employees in warehouses than in supermarkets on average. So 235 is your answer. And once again, that's option C. The answer to question 2, therefore, is option C, 235. Question 3. In the figure, line M is parallel to line N, and line T intersects both lines. What is the value of X? Now, one of the things about parallel lines is that all of these angles have to be the same. So if this is 33 degrees, then this angle here is going to be 33 degrees. That's a consequence of being parallel. So the angle here is the same as the angle here. And as you can see, the X and the 33 fall on the straight line of T. So that means X plus 33 has to add to equal 180 because there are 180 degrees in a straight line. So if we subtract 33 from both sides, we get that X is equal to 147. So X equals 147 is the answer, and that's option D. So D, 147 is the answer to question 3. Question 4. Sean rents a tent at a cost of $11 per day plus a one-time insurance fee of $10. Which equation represents the cost to rent the tent with insurance for D days? So the cost is going to be $11 times the number of days, which we will call D. And then since it's a one-time insurance fee, then we just have to add 10 once. So add 10 once. And that's all we're looking for. C is equal to 11D plus 10. And that is option C. So the answer to question 4 is C, 11D plus 10 is equal to C. So C is the answer to option 4. Question 4. Let's look at number 5. For the right triangle shown, A equals 4, B equals 5. What expression represents the value of C? So there we go. Basically, what this is this is a right triangle. So it means we can use the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. This is on that formula sheet on page 1 of module 2 of the practice test. So right triangles, Pythagorean theorem says if we square the two legs of a right triangle and then add them up, then it's going to be equal to the square of the hypotenuse. So we're looking for a value that represents C, and A is 4 and B is 5. So I get 4 squared plus 5 squared is equal to C squared. And then because I know the hypotenuse is going to be a positive measurement, I can take the positive square root of both sides. So that gives me the square root of 4 squared plus 5 squared is equal to C. So 4 squared plus 5 squared underneath a square root is an expression that represents the value of C. And therefore, the option there is option D. So D is the answer to number 5. Question 6. The function g is defined by g of x is equal to 6x. For what value of g is g of x equal to 54? So we're looking for the output value to be 54. We know that 6x is equal to the output value. So we're asking, when does 6x equal 54? In order to solve this equation, all I have to do is divide both sides by 6. I won't show that. I'll just say when you divide the left-hand side by 6, you get x. When you divide the right-hand side by 6, you get 9. So x equals 9 is the answer to 6. And when you type this in, you will just have to type in the numerical value of 9. So for what value of x is g of x equal to 54? 9 is that value of x. Question 7. The function f is defined by f of x is equal to 8 times x to the third plus 4. What is the value of f of 2? So in this case, I'm going to plug in the input value of 2 for x. I take 8 times the quantity 2 cubed and then add 4. When I do this, what we'll get, let me actually rewrite it that way. 8 times 2 to the third, take the 2 to the third first if you're doing this by hand. That's 8 times 8, which is 64, plus 4 is 68. So f of 2 is equal to 68. And 68 is the answer. That's the numerical value that you'd have to type in. So question 7, the answer is 68. Question 8. The function f is defined by f of x is equal to 1/10 x minus 2. What is the y-intercept of the graph y equals f of x in the xy plane? So the y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. So y-intercept happens when x is equal to 0. So all we have to do is plug in 0 into our function. F of 0 is going to be equal to 1/10 times 0 minus 2. And that gives me out a y value of -2. So what that tells me is that the y-intercept is the point 0, -2. So the y-intercept is 0, -2. And if you look up at my options, that is option B. So B, the point 0, -2 is the answer to question 8. Question 9. A producer is creating a video with a length of 70 minutes. The video will consist of segments that are 1 minute long and segments that are 3 minutes long. Which equation represents this situation where x represents the number of 1 minute videos or video segments, and y represents the number of 3 minute video segments? So if we're talking about total number of minutes, there's 1 minute times each x, meaning the number of 1 minute videos times 1 is going to be the total number of minutes in the 1 minute video segments. Then we're going to have 3 minute segments. We're going to have y of those. So the total number of minutes is going to be 1 times x plus 3 times y. And we already know that the total number of minutes is going to be 70. So 1x plus 3y equals 70 is the equation. You don't have to have that coefficient of 1 if you don't want to. So you can call that x plus 3y equals 70. And that's actually the option that we have, the format of the option we have. D is x plus 3y equals 70. So that equation represents this situation. So the answer to question 9 is D, x plus 3y is equal to 70. Question 10. The function f is defined by f of x is equal to 7x raised to the third power. In the xy plane, the graph of y equals g of x is the result of shifting the graph of f of x down 2 units. Which equation defines function g? So if g of x is the result of shifting graph f of x down 2 units, then g of x will be the same as f of x shifted down 2 units. If we're shifting the y value down, then I'm shifting the output value down too. So I'm subtracting 2 from the output. And what that is going to be is 7x raised to the third power and then minus 2. So that's the g of x that we're looking for. It's 7x raised to the third power minus 2. And obviously that is option D. So the answer to question 10 is D, g of x is equal to 7x raised to the third power minus 2. Question 11. The solution to the given system of equations is x comma y. What is the value of x? So this is going to ask us to solve this equation, this system of equations, or at least solve down till we know what the value of x is. And what we're going to do here is use substitution. Since y is equal to negative 3x, we're going to replace the y value in the second equation with a negative 3x. So substitution in order to solve. That's the thing. So we get 4x plus y is equal to 15. And then I replace that y with a negative 3x. Now this is very nice because when we take 4x and then add a negative 3x, we just get 1x or just x. So we get x equals 15 in this scenario. Therefore, the answer to question number 11 is C, 15. Question 12. In the right triangle shown, what is the value of sine of A? And we can see that we have this right triangle. It says the figure is not drawn to scale, so don't worry about the scale of this thing. But the thing that we're going to use is the mnemonic SOHCAHTOA, which tells us that sine of an angle is equal to the side opposite divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine of an angle is calculated by taking the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and the tangent of an angle is the opposite over the adjacent. Since we're trying to find sine of A, what we're going to do is we're going to look for the side opposite of A and then divide it by the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse. The side opposite of A is the 35. And the hypotenuse is the side opposite of the 90-degree angle. So the side opposite of A is 35. The hypotenuse is 171. And that's all we have to do. 35 over 171 is going to be my answer. And so that's option B. 35 over 171 is the sign of A. So option B is the answer to this question. Question 13. What is the area in square centimeters of a rectangle with length of 34 centimeters and width of 29 centimeters? Well, the area of a rectangle is length times width or width times length. It doesn't matter which order you write those in. If you forget that, that's actually, again, one of the formulas that is provided to you in that formula section of Module 2. In any case, the length is 34 centimeters. The width is 29 centimeters. If you got that backwards, you just do 29 times 34. That's the same thing as 34 times 29. And that's 986. Now, 986 in centimeters times centimeters, we get squared centimeters, or centimeters squared. So 986 is the answer that we're looking for, because we are looking for the area in square centimeters. So 986 is the answer to question 13. Question 14. If x divided by y is 4 and 24x divided by ny is equal to 4, what is the value of n? Now, there's a lot of different ways you could do this. What I'm going to do, hopefully, is an easy way, but maybe to some people it's not the easiest way. What I'm going to do is take this left-hand side, set that equal to 4, and I'm going to sort of factor that left-hand side. I get 24 over n, and then I'm going to think of that as being multiplied times x over y. And then what I can do is I can replace x over y with the number 4. Since x over y is equal to 4, I get that. Dividing 4 on both sides, or you could multiply 24 times 4. Really doesn't matter how you do this, but it matters if you do it right. But there's a number of different ways you can do it. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. That gives me 24 over n is equal to 1. And for this to be true, n has to be 24 as well. You could also think of this as multiplying n on both sides of this equation. So when it asks for what is the value of n, well, n has to be 24. So 24 is my answer to question 14. Again, this is just one way to do it. You could solve for x and then do substitution. You could not factor the way I just did. You can do all kinds of different stuff. But this is one option for solving for n. Question 15. A bowl contains 20 ounces of water. When the bowl is uncovered, the amount of water in the bowl decreases by 1 ounce every 4 days. If 9 ounces of the water remain in this bowl, for how many days has it been uncovered? So we're looking at the amount of water in the bowl. And since we're losing 1 ounce every 4 days, we're basically losing a quarter of an ounce per day. So think of 1 ounce for 4 days. We're losing a quarter of an ounce per day. So when D is 4, we lose 1. But we start with 20 ounces of water. So the amount of water in the bowl is given to me by negative 1/4 D plus 20. Now, 9 ounces of this water remain in the bowl. So we have 9 ounces of water, and we're asking how many days did it take until we got 9 ounces of water. I would subtract 20 from both sides. That gives me negative 11 is equal to negative 1/4 times D. And then I could multiply both sides by a negative 4. If I multiplied both sides by a negative 4, I'd get 44 is equal to 1 times D, or just D. And therefore, this water has been uncovered for 44 days. And the answer, therefore, to question 15 is D, 44. This bowl has been uncovered for 44 days. Question 16. If 9 times 4 minus 3x in parentheses plus 2 is equal to 8 times in parentheses 4 minus 3x in the parentheses plus 18, what is the value of 4 minus 3x? Now, 4 minus 3x is the value we're trying to find. If you want to, you could actually solve this entire equation for x and then plug that number in to 4 minus 3x and figure out what it is. But there's actually an easier way. Some people are able to see this right away. Other times it's harder. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this 8 times 4 minus 3x as a single quantity. And 4 minus 3x is going to be like a new variable. So I'm going to subtract 8 times the variable 4 minus 3x on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side. So I subtract that off from the left-hand side, and then I subtract that off from the right-hand side. And when I do that, I'm going to get one copy of 4 minus 3x on the left-hand side with a plus 2. And then on the right-hand side, I'll just be left with 18. So there we go. And then we are going to subtract 2 from both sides. When you do that, you end up with 4 minus 3x is equal to a positive 16. So 4 minus 3x, the value of 4 minus 3x has to be 16. And therefore, the answer to question 16 is D, 16. There are other ways you can do that. You can think of this equation and introduce a new variable which replaces the 4 minus 3x. Let's say z is equal to 4 minus 3x. And essentially, that means we're just solving this equation for z, right? If I'm thinking z is 4 minus 3x, then I'm solving that equation for z. And then it's pretty easy. You subtract 8z from both sides, subtract 2 from both sides, and you get z equals 16, which tells me 4 minus 3x is equal to 16. So that's another way to do it if you don't like seeing 4 minus 3x as a single value. Just replace it with the letter z and then solve this linear equation for z. But in any case, the answer to question 16 is D, 16. Question 17. A certain township consists of a 5 hectare industrial park and a 24-hectare neighborhood. The total number of trees in the township is 4,529. The equation 5x plus 24y is equal to 4,529 represents this situation. Which of the following is the best interpretation of x in this context? So 5x plus 24y equals 4,529. 4,529 is the number of trees. We know that. That's the total number of trees. 5 is how many hectares are in the industrial park. 24 is how many hectares are in the neighborhood. So if we're looking at 5x, 5 times x should be a number of trees. We're taking 5 hectares times something and getting trees. And therefore, x needs to be in basically trees per hectare. And because it's in the industrial park, it's trees in hectare per hectare of industrial park. Y would be the number of trees per hectare in the neighborhood. And so let's look at what is the best interpretation of x in this context. Well, A would be the right answer. A is the number of trees on average per hectare in the industrial park. So A is the correct answer to question 17. Question 18. Which expression is equivalent to A to the 11/12 power? So the first thing we need to know is we're looking for this power written as some sort of a square root. We have A to the 11/12 power. Hopefully we know that a 12th power is like a 12th root of something. So let's put in the 12th root. So that's going to be the 12th root of A to the 11th power. All right. So obviously I look through my options and that is not one of my options. I have a 12th root of A to the 132nd power. I have a 144th root of A to the 132 power, or a 121th root of A to the 132 power. So this can't be it. And so what this is going to ask us to do is rewrite that A to the 11/12 power as something else. And what we can do is we can take that exponent and multiply it times a 1. Now, we look at the roots that we're given. We're given 12th roots, 144th roots, 121st roots, and 11th roots. And the only one that would make sense is a 144th root. So if I multiply by 12 over 12, then what that gives me is A raised to the power of 132 over 144. 11 times 12 is 132. 12 times 12 is 144. And that means we're taking the 144th root of A raised to the 132nd power. And so that would be equivalent to our A of 11 over 12. Now I look at that, and that is option B. So the answer to question 18 is option B, the 144th root of A raised to the 132nd power. So B is the answer to question 18. Question 19. The dot plots represent the distribution of values in data sets A and B. Which of the following statements must be true? And then the statements are about the median. The median of the data set A is equal to the median of data set B. And then the standard deviation of data set A is equal to the standard deviation of data set B. Let's try to examine option 1 here. Well, if you think about this, both of these data sets are symmetric, and they're symmetric right at the number 13. In other words, if I drew a straight line down the number 13, both of these data sets have dot plots which are mirror images of each other on those sides. So both medians are going to be at 13. And so 1 is true. The option 1 is true. Both medians are 13. So let's write that down. 1 is true. I is true. Both medians are 13. Good. Now let's talk about the standard deviation. Standard deviation is how spread out a data set is. I want you to notice that data set B is very similar to data set A. If I would have crossed out these two dots in data set A, which are both right at 13, and then I would have put 1 at the number 10 and 1 at the number 16, then I would have ended up with data set B. So if I would have taken one dot, put it over here, the other dot, put it over here, I would have ended up with the exact same distribution as data set B. This means that the values in data set A are less spread out than the values in data set B. Because if I would have just kept them right here, these are both right on the median, which is also the mean in this case. Whereas more of the data is further away from our mean. Specifically, those two dots are further away from the mean in data set B. So the standard deviation of data set B is higher than the standard deviation in data set A. So standard deviation is B is higher than standard deviation in A. And that means number 2 is not true. So option 2 is not true, or I'll just say is false. Those standard deviations are not equal. So 1 is true, but 2 is false. And therefore, the answer to question 19 is option A. 1 is true, but 2 is false. So option A is the correct answer to question 19. Question 20. A circle has center O and points R and S lie on the circle. In triangle ORS, the measure of angle ROS is 88 degrees. What is the measure of angle RSO in degrees? Disregard the degree symbol when entering your answer. So, whenever I get stuff like this, geometry problems, I like to draw a picture. So I'm going to draw a picture of a circle whose center is O, which have points on it of RS, and then I will look at the triangle ORS, and then I will label ROS as 88 degrees. I'll do all that and then I'll input it into this Word document. There we go. So this is the picture that we have of our circle with this triangle inside of it. O is the center of the circle, and we have R and S, and ROS is 88 degrees. So we have that labeled. Now, here's the deal. We're looking for the measure RSO. I'm just going to call this the measure of the angle at S of the triangle, and I'll call ORS the measure of the angle at R. So the measure of the angle at S and the measure of the angle at R have to be the same. So the measure of the angle at R has to be equal to the measure of the angle at S. Because if you look at the sides opposite, those are equal to each other because they're both the radius of this circle. And therefore, I have an isosceles triangle, which means that the angle at R and the angle at S are the same. And therefore, knowing that, along with the fact that angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees, once again, that's in the formula section of the test if you forget it, we can safely say that 88 plus the angle at R plus the angle at S, so plus the angle at S plus the angle at S, all add up to 180. I said R and S, and I'm replacing the R with an S since they're both the same angle. So all we have to do is solve that equation, subtracting 88 from both sides, and then combining the S plus the S gives me 2 times the angle at S is equal to 92 degrees. And then I would divide both sides by 2. The angle at S is equal to 46 degrees. And that's the final answer. So the measure of, I'm saying RSO, I'm just calling that S for short. S or RSO angle is 46 degrees. So 46 is the final answer to question number 20. Question 21. The regular price of a shirt at a store is $11.70. The sales price of the shirt is 80% less than the regular price, and the sale price is 30% greater than the store's cost for the shirt. What is the store's cost in dollars for the shirt? Disregard the dollar sign when entering your answer. So let's talk real quick about 80% less and 30% greater. If we're talking about 80% less, that's a multiplication by, well, 1 minus 0.80. So we're multiplying by 0.20. 80% less, we start with 100% and then we subtract 80%. As a percent put into decimal forms, 100% is 1, 80% is 0.8. And in a similar vein, when we talk about 30% greater, that's a multiplication by 1 plus 30%, which as a decimal is 0.30, which is a multiplication by 1.30 or just 1.3. Doesn't matter how you write that. So now we're ready to set up what we have. It says the sales price or the sale price of a shirt is 80% less. That's 20%. than the regular price. I'll just put REG for regular price. And then it also says the sales price is 30% greater 1.30 than the store's cost for the shirt. And then it's asking, what is the store's cost? Now, I know that the regular price is $11.70. So what I do is I take this equation and say the sales price is 20% of that $11.70. That means that the sales price is whatever I get when I multiply that, which is $2.34. So sales price or the sale price is $2.34. But I know that the sale price is 1.30 times the cost. So I just replace the sale price of $2.34 and I set that equal to 1.30 multiplied times the cost. Solving this would force me to divide both sides by 130. When I divide both sides by 1.30, I end up with a cost of $1.80. Now, when we write that in, just disregard the dollar sign. We write that as 1.80. So the final answer to question 21 is 1.80. Question 22. A cube has edge length of 68 inches. A solid sphere with radius of 34 inches is inside the cube, such that the sphere touches the center of each face of the cube. To the nearest inch, what is the volume of the space in the cube not taken up by the sphere? So imagine we have a cubic box and we have a big ball inside. We are looking for the space that is not filled by the ball in the box. Just for this once, I'll give a visual on a graphing device here, but you probably can visualize it without me telling you or showing you. But I'll go ahead and do that anyways. So here's my visual. Now I've drawn the box with the top open so you can see inside of it. But essentially we have a sphere inside of a box, and all of the side lengths of this box are exactly what was described. So I'm looking for the area of, or not the area, the volume of the interior of the box not filled with the sphere. Okay, again, I'm leaving the top off of this so that we can see this concept easier and so you can see inside. So what is this volume of the interior of this box not taken up by the sphere? In order to do that, we take the volume of this cube and we just subtract off the volume of the sphere. So that is what we're going to do. We're going to take the volume of the cube and just subtract off the volume of the sphere. Well, when we do that, the volume of the cube, a cube has volume of side length times side length times side length. If it was rectangular, we'd call it width times length times height. Since each edge length is 68 inches, we're just going to take 68 times 68 times 68. That's the volume of the cube. And then we subtract off the volume of the sphere. Now a sphere has volume of 4/3. times pi times the radius cubed. Since the radius of our sphere is 34, we can take that 34 and cube it. So let me state that again. The volume of a cube is length times width times height. The volume of a sphere is 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. If you don't know those formulas are actually on the formula section of the practice test in Module 2. Let me show you that for reference. So again, on page 40, here we have a cube, length, width, height. Volume is length times width times height. Here's our sphere. Volume is 4/3 times pi times radius raised to the third power. So that's where I'm getting these formulas from, or that's where you should get those formulas from if you don't have those memorized. So that's it. And now we just have to calculate. Plug this into your calculator. You get approximately, this is going to be a rounded number, 149,795.7898 if I round out to 4 decimal places. This says to the nearest cubic inch. So what we're trying to do is round to the nearest whole number because this is in cubic inches. So what this is, rounded to the nearest cubic inch, is 149,796 cubic inches. Sorry, I put a... So 149,796 cubic inches. And that is option A. So 149,796. Option A is the answer to question 22. Question 23. One of the equations in a system of 2 linear equations is given. The system has no solution. Which equation could be the second equation in the system? In order to have no solution, the system of 2 equations has to have 2 parallel lines. And if we want parallel lines, then we want the same slope, but different y-intercepts. So that's what we want. Now, in this case, the equation of the line that's given has slope of 6 and y-intercept of 0, 18. So y equals 6x plus 18. That's of the form y equals mx plus b. So we have slope, which we usually call m of 6, and y-intercept of 0, 18. So we want our line to have, the other line has to have slope 6, but a different y-intercept. Now, if we look through our options, option A has the equation. If I add 6x to both sides, it gives me y equals 6x plus 18. That's the same slope. That's good news. But it's the same y-intercept. I need a different y-intercept. So that's not going to work. That has same slope, same y-intercept. So this does not work. Option B, when I add 6x to both sides, gives me y equals 6x plus 22. That's also the same slope as the line that we were given, but this one has a different y-intercept. The y-intercept in this case is 0.22. So this does work. And so right now I can say definitively that B is the correct answer. So B is the correct answer. I don't have to go through checking C and D, but I will anyways, just for the sake of completeness. If you rewrote the equation in C, it would be y equals 12x plus 36, and that has a different slope. So that's not going to work. And if you did the same thing with part D, you'd have y equals 12x plus 18. That's going to have a different slope as well. And so that's not going to work either. So the answer to question 23 is B. B is the line that has the same slope but different y-intercepts. And therefore, it is going to be parallel to the given line. And therefore, the system of linear equations will have no solution. Question 24. Triangles PQR and LMN are graphed in the XY plane. Triangle PQR has vertices PQ and R at 4, 5, 4, 7, and 6, 5, respectively. Triangle LMN has vertices at LMN at 4, 5, 4, 7 plus K, and 6 plus K, 5, respectively, where K is a positive constant. If the measure of angle Q is T degrees, what is the measure of angle N? So I would draw a picture in this scenario. It's going to be the best if we draw a picture. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be as precise as I can. Again, I'll draw it off screen and then dump it into this Word document. So there is the drawing, whoops, dumped in to this problem. And what we see is that at angle Q, we have a measure of T. Now, first off, let me state this. We are at P and L are the same points. They're both 4, 5. Q is going to be at 4, 7. R is going to be at 6, 5. That's going to create a right angle at P and a right angle at L when I do the M and the N. So because I have same X values of all 4, same Y values of all 5, I get that right angle at angle P and angle L. So we have a right angle, and that also is going to imply something about these two lines. Let me state first that we're moving K units up and K units to the right, and that's going to force these two lines to be parallel. So these two lines are going to be parallel, and therefore, if we're talking about angle T is also going to be this angle. So M is also going to have angle T. So the angle at M is also going to be T because of the parallel lines. They are parallel because the measurement here is K units, the measurement here is K units. Also, notice that this is 2 units up, this is 2 units over. So we went 2 up, 2 over. Now we've went 2 plus K up and 2 plus K over. So we're getting parallel lines, we're getting the same slope. the slope of this line is going to be down 2 over 2. The slope of this line is going to be down 2 plus k over 2 plus k. And so we get -1 as the slope of both lines. So that's the idea. So we get -1 as the slope of both lines, and that means they are both parallel. So T is the angle there as well. So if I'm looking for the angle measure of angle N, it is going to be, well, since we have a right triangle, one angle is T, the other angle has to be, let me write this down. So we have a right triangle so that we have a 90-degree angle. We have one measure that's T and the other measure angle that is N, and those have to add up to 180. Subtracting 90 from both sides gives me that T plus N is equal to 90, which tells me that my angle N is going to be 90 minus T degrees. And therefore, the answer to this question is C, 90 minus T. So that's the answer to question 24, C, 90 minus T. Now, if you're really clever, you'll see that because we have this length of 2 here, this is actually isosceles. So 90 minus T is the same thing as T if you're actually watching that closely. But 90 minus T is my option that we have to choose. So 90 minus T is the correct answer. Question 25. For each real number r, which of the following points lies on the graph of each equation in the xy plane for the given system? Now, this system is a pair of linear equations, but you'll notice that the second equation is just a result of taking the first equation and multiplying by 5 on both sides. So if I multiply 5 on both sides of the first equation, I get the second equation. That means this system is going to have infinitely many answers. And also, I can check the answers on one line only, since both lines are giving me the same answers. So we can check each point on the first line in the system. All right. So that is 2x plus 3y equals 7. So that's what I'm going to do for all of these options. I'm going to take the point in A, and I'm going to plug it in to 2x plus 3y equals 7. When I do that, I have to replace the x with r over 5 plus 7. And I have to replace the y with a negative r over 5 plus 35. Now, when we start to simplify that, that would give me, I'll simplify this in a couple of stages, 2/5 r plus 14 minus 3/5 r plus 105 is equal to 7. If I simplify that left-hand side, I get 119 when I combine 14 and 105. And then when I combine 2/5 r minus 3/5 r, I get minus 1/5 r. For saving a little bit of room, I'll just do it right there. That is obviously not true for all values of R? So that's not true for all values of R, and therefore option A is not going to work. So let's move on to option B. Once again, we're going to go 2x plus 3y equals 7. And then I'm going to plug in my negative 3r over 2 for the x value. No, negative 3r over 2 plus 7 halves for the x value. So x gets replaced with negative 3r over 2 plus 7 halves. And then the y gets replaced with just the letter r, which is kind of nice. So let's distribute the 2. That's going to give me a negative 3r plus 7 plus 3r is equal to 7. Combining the minus 3r and the plus 3r gives me 7 over 7. And that is going to be true for all r. So this one is true for all values of r. And therefore, B is going to be the correct answer. So B is the correct answer to this problem 25. Now, again, if I were doing this on a test and I had short time, I would just stop right there. But if you want to check your answer, you can always check your answer by making sure C and D don't work either. So let's apply the same logic to point C. We have 2x plus 3y is equal to 7. Replace the x with just the letter r. Replace the y with a 2r over 3 plus 7/3. And then simplify. When I simplify, I get 2r plus another 2r plus 7 is equal to 7. 2r plus 2r is not 0, it's 4r. So I get 4r plus 7 is equal to 7. That is not true for all r. And therefore, C does not work as an option either. In a similar way, D is not going to work. So, but let's go through all the steps. 2x plus 3y equals 7. Replace the x with the r, again in this case, and replace the y with a negative 3r over 2 plus 7 halves. Now, it turns out that when you simplify this, you end up with a bunch of ugly numbers. You get negative 2.5 times r plus 10.5 is set equal to 7. And that's obviously not true for all r either. And so the only one that was true for all r is option B. And so option B is the correct answer for 25. Like I said, once we knew that B was the correct answer, we could have stopped there. But sometimes it's nice to check all 4 just to make sure that I did not make a calculation mistake in my processing. Question 26. In the given equation, C is a positive constant. which of the following is one of the solutions to the given equation? And then it gives us a few options. Now, in this case, again, you could try to plug in these things in for x, but it becomes very difficult quickly, especially when you get into these difficult operations. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve this equation by using algebraic techniques. We have x squared over the square root of x squared minus c squared. And that's set equal to c squared over the square root of x squared minus c squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract that entire fraction. I'm going to subtract the c squared over that ugly square root from both sides of my equation. And that would give me 39 alone on the right-hand side, and x squared over the square root minus c squared over the square root on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side, since these two have the same denominator, I can combine them into one single fraction. That's going to be x squared minus c squared, and divided by that square root of x squared minus c squared. Set equal to 39. Okay, so all of that is equivalent to my original equation. Now, here's the trick. X squared minus c squared, we can think of as being the square root of x squared minus c squared, quantity squared. If we do that, then I can cancel one copy of the square root in the numerator and one copy of the square root in the denominator to just give me that the square root of the single square root of x squared minus c squared is equal to 39. Now what I would do is solve for x here. So I'd square both sides. I would end up with x squared minus c squared is equal to 39 squared. And then I'd add c squared to both sides. So x squared is equal to 39 squared plus c squared, or c squared plus 39 squared. I'm leaving it as 39 squared because that's the way my answers give it to me. And so x could be either the positive square root of this or the negative square root of that. So x could have been either the square root of c squared plus 39 squared, or x could have been the negative square root of c squared plus 39 squared. So I hope one of those options works. By the way, doing this division is perfectly fine as long as x is not c or negative c, because if x is c or negative c, then I'm dividing this thing by 0. I'm getting dividing by 0, which is not okay. So here are my two options for x. Let's go look at which ones they are. It looks like option D is the correct option. Negative square root of c squared plus 39 squared. That's one of my two options. So the final answer for question 26 is D. negative square root of c squared plus 39 squared. Question 27. The quadratic function g models the depth in meters below the surface of the water of a seal t minutes after the seal entered the water during a dive. So the function estimates that the seal reached its maximum depth of 302.4 meters 6 minutes after it entered the water, then reached the surface of the water 12 minutes after it entered the water. Based on the function, what was the estimated depth to the nearest meter of the seal 10 minutes after it entered the water? So here we go. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function that's modeling depth. So you can do this by, I typically just write depth as the positive 302.4. That may look a little bit weird when you draw it, because what we're going to do is we're going to have an X and a Y axis. We're going to start at the origin. We're going to go up to a depth of 302.4 and then back down. If my depth is positive, it's going to look like this. And back down until we hit the surface of the water. Now, I know that's weird looking because it's inverted of what the actual seal is doing. The seal is going down and then back up. But if you want to use a positive depth, you can use that. If you wanted to use a depth of 302.4 and use negative 302.4, then you could drop the other way too. But essentially, we're getting a quadratic here that is pointing down. And we know a couple of points on this quadratic. We know that we're entering the water at 0, 0. Then we know the depth, the maximum depth, is at 6 minutes and 302.4 meters. So that's the point 6 comma 302.4. And then we're back out of the water at 12 minutes. So 12 comma 0 would be another point. So we have a few points. We have the point 0, 0. We have the point 12, 0. And then we have what is essentially the vertex at 6 comma 302.4. Again, if you wanted to think of depth as being a negative, since it's underneath the water, you can do this the exact same thing with a negative 302.42. Just all your Y values go from positives to negatives. But there you go. Now we're looking at a quadratic here as we saw. And a quadratic equation can be written as either ax squared plus bx plus c, or it can be written as y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. In this case, that second option is easier because we know the vertex happens at 6 comma 302.4. So we know what our h and k are. We have y equals a times x minus 6 squared plus 302.4. And that's what the parabola will look like. Now I can use either of these two other points because when I plug in 0, I'm going to get negative 6 squared. When I plug in 12, I'm going to get 6 squared. Both y values are going to be 0. So I can plug in either the 0, 0 or the 12, 0 point. I think I'll plug in 0, 0. Actually, let's plug in 12, 0. Why not? So 0 is the y value. We don't know the a yet. We go 12 minus 6 quantity squared plus 302.4. That gives me 0 is equal to a times 6 squared, which is 36, plus 302.4. So subtracting 302.4 from both sides, we get negative 302.4 is equal to a positive 36a. And then dividing by 36 would give us, oh, excuse me, an a of negative 8.4. So there we go. Now we know that the equation that I'm looking for is y equals negative 8.4 times the quantity x minus 6 squared plus 302.4. That's going to give me my depth out as a positive number. Now, this is the function we're using. Based on this function, what was the estimated depth to the nearest meter of the seal 10 minutes after it entered the water? If we're looking for the depth, that's the y value. The x value is minutes after we've entered the water, so negative 8.4 times 10 minus 6 squared plus 302.4. That's just going to be 4 squared, so negative 8.4 times 4 squared plus 302.4 gives me a y value of 168. So the depth 10 minutes after it enters the water is 168 feet. Or excuse me, not feet, meters. I apologize. That was in meters, not feet. So 168 meters of depth. And that's the answer to question 27. We just write to the nearest meter, what was the estimated depth? It'd be 168. So 168 is the answer to question 27. 168. And that's it. That's the last question on this module. So that concludes module 2 of the math portion of the SAT practice test number 8. There is a link to the explanation of solutions to the other math module on this practice test, that is module 1 of practice test 8, in the description of this video. There's also a link to a playlist of the other math portions of SAT practice tests as well. So all the way from practice test number 1 to practice test number 10, both module 1 and 2 for each of those. That will be linked in the description of this video as well, a playlist for all of those. And then lastly, if you are planning on taking the SAT soon, good luck. I hope this video helps you out.